welcome back to my channel. My name is Allie if you're new here, and on my channel we talk about books, so let's get into it. This video is going to be my July wrap-up and a TBR game, kind of. We're gonna start implementing a TBR game into my channel, but I've got to get used to it. So it's not gonna be its own separate video until I get comfortable with it and can actually prove to myself that I can actually accomplish reading off of a TBR, which I very rarely can do. So we're gonna start with the books I read, my wrap up, and then we will move over to the TBR game. Let's get right into it. I read 8 books in July. I'm trying to slowly build myself back up to the double digits. I'm hoping August will be my month, but 8 books I'm still happy with. I'm still ahead on my Goodreads goal. I think I'm at 72 books for the year right now, so being the 1st of August, I'm very happy with that number. But the very first book that I read for July was Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun by Ella Cosimano. I gave this book 4 stars. I really love the Finley Donovan series. I think that it's great. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a good murder mystery kind of type series. It's really hard to explain the 3rd book in the series, of course, but the first book does follow our main character, Finley Donovan, and she is a mom of 2, recently divorced. She's going through it. She's an aspiring writer, and so she has a hard time paying the bills because that's a very hard industry to make money in when you're aspiring, and that's her full-time job. So she's really struggling when she gets overheard at a Panera when she's with her agent having a conversation about her murder mystery book. She gets overheard by somebody who hires her to be a hit woman. So this book follows our main character Finley and her babysitter Vero as they navigate how to go about potentially being hit women. So I think that this series is fantastic. It's so much fun. It's great. So I highly recommend it. I loved all 3 of the books. My mom actually just binged the whole series on audio from Libby as well, and she also loved them. So highly recommend. The second book that I read in July was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I really liked this book. I also gave it 4 stars, not quite a 5-star, but I thought that this book was fantastic. It follows our main character June, and she is a aspiring writer as well, and her debut never really picked up, but her friend Athena's debut blew up, and so the beginning of the book is her navigating not doing well successfully while her friend is doing really well successfully, and then her friend dies. And she steals her manuscript and edits it as her own and publishes it under a racially ambiguous name. And it is wild. This book is really hard to read in a way of you're not gonna like the main character and you're not supposed to like the main character. But it's very weird to read from a perspective of a book where you don't like the main character, but you like the book. It's weird. It's a very strange dynamic, but I think that R.F. Kuang did it beautifully. I really enjoyed this book. The ending was not what I anticipated, but I still think overall it deserves the 4 stars. It deserves the hype, and I highly recommend you pick it up. The next book that I read in July was Golden Girl by Ellen Hilderbrand. I gave this book a 3.5 star. I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't say that it was groundbreaking. It follows our main character Vivian, and in the first 15 pages of the book she gets hit by a car and dies. And this is about her being in the afterlife and getting 3 nudges from her guardian. She gets 3 nudges, and I think it's 90 days that she gets to watch over her family after she passes. And so she pretty much just gets to see what's happening, see their grief, see them process it, see what's going on, and then also gets 3 nudges where she can nudge to make something not happen. And I thought that the concept was really cool. I just felt like the ending was not executed well, and it was very long. So that's why it got a 3.5 stars for me. But overall, I think that the concept was good. The first half of the book was really good. I was really invested, really interested. I just felt like the second half kind of fell off for me, which is why it wasn't a higher rating. But I am interested in picking up more books from Ellen Hildebrand in the future, so I will be doing that. The next book that I finished in July was Carnegies Made by Marie Benedict. This book follows our main character, Clara Kelly, and she is going to America from Ireland, I believe, to get a job to send money back to her family. And when she gets there, she gets mistaken for a different Clara Kelly and somehow ends up being a lady's maid for the Carnegies, so specifically for Andrew Carnegie's mother. So this book is based in history, follows real people, but it's a fictionalized work. So the things in this book didn't necessarily happen, but the people in this book were real historical figures. It was cool for me to read this book. I talked about this a little bit in my vlog on this video, or on this book, but it was cool for me personally to listen to this book because I actually have spent some time in Pittsburgh and it's somewhere that's really like close to me, and so I thought that it was really cool to kind of get a step into Pittsburgh in I think it's the 1800s. So I do recommend this book. It isn't for everybody. If you're not into historical fiction, you're not gonna like this book, but I thought that it was great, and the timing of it being like in Pittsburgh and having the audiobook available, it just worked for me and I really enjoyed it. So I did give this 4 stars. The next book that I read in July was one that I loved. Absolutely loved. I read The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. I am trying to get through all of the Riley Sager books in anticipation for the newest one, the only one left, which is up here. But I needed to finish this last book by Riley Sager, which was The Last Time I Lied, and I gave it 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. Highly recommend it. I think it's one of my favorite Riley Sager books, and I definitely recommend that you pick it up. It follows our main character, Emma, and it's dual perspective. So it follows her back when she was 13 and then now when she's 28. And the book takes place at Camp Nightingale, which is a camp that is owned by a very wealthy woman who wants to have a place for girls to go to a summer camp, basically, and like, you know, do summer camp things. But in her first year there, when she was 13, her 3 cabin mates went missing and were never found. And she knows more than she's letting on. So after they all went missing, the camp closed for 15 years. So this is 15 years later, the camp is reopening, and the owner of the camp asked Emma to go back and be a counselor. So actually, I think she's a teacher, but so Emma goes back to be a teacher, and things are not as they seem, and she's trying to figure out what happened to these girls that have been haunting her for the last 15 years, and strange things are happening. And that's all I'm going to tell you. Everything else you should just go in blind, but it was so good. It was so entertaining, and I absolutely loved it, so I highly recommend that you pick it up. The next book that I read was Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan. I thought that this book was phenomenal. It follows our main character, Swanee, and she is an audiobook narrator, and she used to narrate romance books, but she didn't believe in the romance books, so she did that under a name, like a fake name. So then she switched over to mystery, thriller, fantasy, whatever, under her actual name. But when the person who wrote the majority of the romance books that she read passes away, there is one final work that she had that she wanted specifically Swanee to work on. So Swanee accepts partially for the money because her grandma is in memory care and she needs to pay for her to live in this memory care center, but also partially because she just wants to do it because she loved this author. So she goes in to do this and she meets the co-narrator, and then the romance ensues from there. That's all I'm going to tell you because I think that it was fun to just go in pretty blind to this book, but it is a romance. I did love it. I thought it was great. I listened to it in like pretty much one day, but 2 by like a couple hours, and I thought that it was fantastic. I gave this book a 4.5 stars and I highly recommend it. Okay, the next book that I read in July was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I I love this book. This book was fantastic. I did annotate it. And I highly recommend it. I know a lot of people don't love it. It's not a typical fantasy book, as in some of the things are not as fleshed out as a normal fantasy book would be, so that's just something to keep in mind, I guess, but I do highly recommend this book. I don't even want to tell you anything about it. I just want you to go in blind. The littlest thing I'm going to tell you is it's about our main character, Violet Sorrengail, and she wanted to go into the scribes quadrant and be a scribe, work in the archives with books and paper and all of that, and her mother, the general of the Rider Army, pretty much told her that she didn't have a choice and she had to train to become a dragon rider, which is one of the deadliest occupations in their world. So she kind of gets thrown into this, and this is her going through the college. So that's all I'm going to tell you. I highly recommend you pick it up. I know it's pretty hard to get your hands on, but I've been seeing it in stores. I actually saw it in stores for the first time the other day, so I highly recommend it. Also, if you're trying to get a hold of it and you're having a hard time, I ordered mine from Barnes & Noble and I did get it sooner, like a couple weeks sooner than I said I would. So that might be an option, but I'm not telling you that that's gonna happen. That's just was the case for me. So yeah, there you go. And then the last book that I read in July was The Locked Door by Frida McFadden, and I gave this book 3 stars. I finished it yesterday and it was strange. It was very weird. It was very not what I expected. It follows our main character, Nora, and it's kind of dual perspective of when she was, or dual timeline, I mean. It's dual timeline of when she was 11 and when she's in her 30s, I think. And when she's 11, she finds out that her dad is a serial killer and he gets taken away. And then the other perspective is 26 years later on the anniversary of him being captured. And there's a copycat killer. And things start happening again. And they specifically start happening again to her patients because she is a doctor. And so obviously the cops suspect her because it's being done in the same MO as her dad. So that's kind of all I'm going to give you because it's definitely a murder mystery and I don't want to spoil anything. But it was interesting. I think if you like Frida McFadden's work, you will enjoy it. I wouldn't necessarily say it was like the best murder mystery I've ever read. It was very strange. I feel like some of the stuff just came out of nowhere, but you might like it. So I would recommend it if that's something that you're interested in, and it's fairly short. I would say the audiobook is horrible. The narrator, That being said, those were the 8 books that I read in July. Let's quickly get to the TBR game. So I put together a TBR jar, except for it's a candle holder because this is just what I had around. So I put probably like 30 prompts in here, and I'm going to draw 3 for this first video. And if I can prove to myself that I can get through 3, then next month I will draw more and maybe make it like its own video out of this, but I want to try it first. So we're just gonna mix it into this video. So I'm gonna pick 3 out. I'll talk through my books, talk through the options, talk through what I choose, and we'll go from there. A book with an ugly cover. Okay, I'm gonna just turn my chair around here. Okay, I don't have a ton of like ugly books, but this is one that's pretty short that I think I can get through, and it's definitely out of my comfort zone. So I'm just gonna go with it and not even pick another option to like read through, but I'm gonna read The Crying Law of 49, and this is by Thomas Pynchon. I think that's how you say this. I don't know anything about this book, but I think that the cover is horrendous and I want to read it so that I can decide if I want to keep it or not. So that's really the only thing I have to say about that. So let's go ahead and get the next prompt. Okay, this one is a book by a favorite author. And let's see. I think that we're just gonna go for it. Riley Sager is one of my favorite authors, and I've been desperately meaning to read this book, so I think let's just go for it and read the only one left this month. Read a book set in the summer. Okay, this is a good one. I think, let's see. I think it's gonna be between these two. Let me see how long they both are. Okay, this one's 354 pages. and this one's 358 pages. But I think I'm gonna read Beach Read. I'm gonna make it happen. So yeah, I'm gonna read Beach Read by Emily Henry. I'm excited. This is gonna be my first Emily Henry book, so I'm gonna get this read, and I'm excited to tell you my thoughts in next month's wrap up. So those are the books that I'm going to be reading for July. Obviously, I'm gonna read more than just that, but those are the books that I'm going to force myself to read for my TBR. So that being said, I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me talk about the books that I loved from July. Please let me know down below which books you read in July and which books you are excited to read in August, and I will talk to you guys in my next one. Bye!